Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. High-speed train. Congressman David Chen found himself where he never guessed he'd be. The dining car on the express. A high-speed train humming through the Hungarian countryside. A patchwork of browns and gray dirty snow flashed by. Abandoned Soviet-era factories passed surreal in skeletal frames, riddled with broken windows and crumbling walls. David's head pounded. Nausea caused him to sweat. He hated trains, but loved his wife, and the Prague conference was over. Just one more meeting, and then he and his wife could take a river cruise out of Budapest. Studying the wine list across from David sat Marcus Blackwood. When the waiter came, he ordered a 2016 Tokaji. The waiter paused and bit his lower lip, avoiding Blackwood's eyes. "We only have a 2018. Your boss promised the 2016, Blackwood said, stroking his precisely trimmed stubble. "I suggest you find it, or else." David noted his old friend, the Blackwood he'd grown up with, the new director of Aid Alliance, had mastered making threats. "Trains have a finite quality," Blackwood mused as they waited for the wine. "Once you're on them, you can't get off." David sipped water from a crystal glass. "But you can change the destination. That depends on who's controlling the switches," Blackwood said. "By the way, how's your Sarah? She starts Columbia in the fall. Is that right? The tuition must be a killer." His stomach rolled over. How did Blackwood know about the Columbia acceptance letter? "She's fine. Elizabeth and I are quite proud of her. I saw you with Elizabeth at the Prague conference. Vacation? Yes. Doubling up the conference with time in Budapest." Blackwood winked. "And a write-off for the entire trip?" Blackwood tossed his right hand. "I was thinking about how we've known each other since the early days. Hell, I was at your wedding. We're warriors, you and I. Into the breach and all that. Well, this warrior is getting tired of the congressional grind. I'm thinking of not running next term. Call it quits." Blackwood laughed, his thick frame tight against his dress shirt. "Say it ain't so." "No, I would quit. But there's more I want to do. A few years, maybe. Then on to the speaker circuit. Or maybe a pack." The waiter returned with a 2016. "We're in luck, Mr. Blackwood." He opened the wine, offered a taste, then served them both. He carefully placed the bottle on the immaculate white tablecloth. "About your upcoming committee vote," Blackwood said. "Aid distribution, of course, is of paramount importance. But with our audit showing only 30 cents on the dollar reaching recipients, there's some pushback we're fighting against." "I've reviewed the proposal," David said. $8 billion might take some time to get through committee. Blackwood adjusted his broad shoulders and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need to think about this from the 30,000-foot view," he said. "After all, think of the optics. We're supporting democracy, fighting corruption, and aiding fledgling governments who need the world's help." The waiter refilled their wine glasses while the two men looked on. When he left, Blackwood gulped his wine, leaned into the table, and reached out to adjust David's tie. "Our organization believes there's a benefit to a network of partners. We need expertise to walk us through a complex banking system, the regulatory environment. Would you consider getting involved?" A non-profit, hip deep in money laundering, David thought. Excessive compensation, shell companies. A big plunge for a guy who doesn't fudge on taxes. Never has. Never will. "I'm a congressman. I can't touch this, you know that," David said. No. "Your role would be legitimate, I assure you," Blackwood said. "That's what the advisory board is all about. Insurance for," he chuckled, "derailments. We want you as a board member after your term ends. It's just, well, in the meantime, we'd like your advice. As a friend." The dulled rush of an opposing train sped by their window. Blackwood steepled his hands in front of him. "How's Elizabeth's gallery, by the way? Her art might be worth more once she's passed. Of course, that could be decades away. We certainly don't want any harm to come to her, do we?" Blackwood looked down and cut another piece of his steak. David's fork froze on the way to his mouth. He felt anger ripping his insides at the veiled threat against his wife. After slowly setting his fork down, he picked up his wine glass. His hand shook as he gripped the glass, but he gripped harder, and then harder still. The train entered a tunnel. David lost his concentration, diverted by the sudden brightness of the two men's reflection in the window. He stared at the image, but the man in the reflection who looked like him didn't stare back, but shattered the glass with his hand. David stared, transfixed. His reflection picked up a shard with his bleeding hand and wrapped the pointed glass with his cloth napkin. He then reached across the table and slashed Blackwood's throat. Blood splattered on the table as the reflection of Blackwood collapsed. The reflection blanked out as the train shot from the tunnel exit, the horn howling into the twilight. David stared at the wine glass in his hand. Blackwood was no longer across from him. David stumbled from the dining car. He lurched down the corridor to his sleeper cabin, fell into Elizabeth as she opened the door, reeled to the water closet, and retched in the toilet. "David, what happened?" Elizabeth called through the door. My God! The train approached the outskirts of the city. High rises ahead, pinned to the night sky. The lights in the windows staring down. Soon the train squealed into the station. Elizabeth gripped her husband's arm as they walked to the taxi stand, her eyes riveted on his face. David? Darling? Are you okay? What happened? It's nothing, he said. She held him closer. Are you feeling better? Talk to me. Did you forget anything? David steadied himself against his wife. No, I haven't left anything. As they walked to the taxi stand, he felt in his gut that Blackwood was gone. He realized he'd left him on the train. Some things you can never explain, he thought. But then he felt oddly privileged. He smiled, and even the grime of Budapest tasted a little cleaner. Fate, or science, or the devil himself had stepped in. But not God, he thought. No, this wasn't God. It was another presence who didn't like the alliance, weighing the direction of his daughter's future, his wife's safety, or the price for his looking the other way. Your hand's bleeding, Elizabeth said. It looks like a piece of glass. For such a time as this, once a week, for the past 10 weeks, Hattie had come to the local cafe for Bible study with a few of her friends from church. It was led by Marissa, one of the long-standing members of the church. Once a week, for the past 10 weeks, Hattie had left the cafe feeling uplifted, inspired, and closer to her Creator. And this week, the 11th week, she expected no different. Uplifting music wafted through the speakers, mixing with the sounds of dishes clanking and milk frothing behind the counter. The familiar noise was music to Hattie's ears as she entered the coffee shop. "Hattie!" Carmen squealed, beckoning Hattie over from the door. "Coffee's on me today. I got you your usual." Hattie smiled. Carmen was the personification of generosity, although that wasn't always the case. "How are you doing?" she asked, sliding into the booth that they always sat at. "Better than I deserve," Harper quoted, appearing behind them. It's what Carmen always said when asked that question. It's the truth. God is so good. As long as I'm breathing, it's more than I deserve. She shrugged. Harper slid into the booth next to Hattie, smiling. "Is Marissa late for the first time ever?" Hattie asked, looking around. "I thought I saw her car outside." In response, Marissa came out of the bathroom and joined the 3 college girls at their booth. "Good morning, girls," she said, eyes bright, as she took her seat next to Carmen. The 4 girls took each other's hands, and Marissa opened them in prayer before they opened their Bibles and began reading and discussing the book of Esther. Is it wrong to be so engrossed in divine wisdom that you lose track of what's happening around you? Surely not, although it can be dangerous. What is wrong is to come into a quiet, privately owned cafe at 11:38 a.m., lock the doors, aim a gun at the ceiling, and set it off. Which is exactly what happened next. The shot rang out in the near silence of the cafe, piercing through the air like only a bullet can, sending a singing bell into the ears of all who were near it. A young child across the shop screamed and was instantly grabbed by his mother, who hid under a table with her back to the aisle, blocking anyone from getting her child. A barista dropped a porcelain cup out of shock, and it shattered on the floor, spilling hot liquid everywhere. Hattie cupped her hands over her mouth so as to not scream. "Everybody hold up your phones," the man shouted, swinging his gun around. "Hold them up high." It took no time at all for everyone to comply. "Good. Now you." He pointed his gun at the man who was standing at the counter. "Go and get them. Bring all the phones to me." The barista couldn't have been more than 17, and his hands shook as he went around to each table and collected the phones. That 17-year-old boy wasn't religious, but at that moment, he was praying. Praying that somebody, anybody, had called the police. "It'll be okay, girls," Marissa whispered. Hattie could tell that she was trying to be strong, but she could also see the fear in her eyes when she glanced at the man with the gun. "You four." The man pointed his gun in the direction of Hattie and her friends, and it was at that point that Harper began to cry. "In front of the door. Stand." None of them knew what he meant, but he motioned for them to get up. And since he had a gun, they did what he asked. Then he did it again to the next table, making them stand in front of the windows. Soon, the whole store was stood in front of the glass entrance to the small cafe, including the little boy and his mother. While he was lining them up, the sound of sirens began, getting louder and louder, closer and closer, until they were too loud for Hattie to bear, and she covered her ears. Henry Walker, an amplified and slightly muffled voice, said from outside, "This is the New York City Police Department. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Of course, Henry did no such thing, but waved his gun in the air, almost as if he was saying, "Don't try me." Next to Hattie, Carmen was holding her necklace so tightly that her knuckles were turning white, while her other hand was entwined with Harper's. Marissa's lips were moving, but there was no sound coming out. She was praying. Not a bad idea, Hattie thought. So she joined in. She closed her eyes and began to pray. As she did, words from the passages that the four girls had been going through came to mind. It was a popular verse, seen on stickers and coffee mugs, for such a time as this. Of course, the full verse was a bit more convicting, but that's the part that rang through Hattie's young mind as the minutes turned into hours. There was a clock on the wall behind the shop counter, and it served as a reminder of just how long these people had been standing here. 2:30, 3 hours, and the police had done nothing. "Why aren't they just coming in?" someone asked to Hattie's left. "We're blocking the door. They no doubt have a sniper on the roof, waiting to take the shot. But they can't because they might hit one of us," she responded, her voice low. It had been too long standing here. She didn't want to do this, but she had put it off long enough. She took a deep breath, in and out. It always brought her peace, ever since she read that the name Yahweh was originally written without any vowels, and that in every breath you could hear it being said. Once she took a deep breath, she stepped forward, just a little bit. "What are you doing?" the guy with the gun asked, aiming his weapon at her chest. "Get back in line." "You don't look so good," Hattie said, her voice shaking ever so slightly. "Can I get you a cup of water?" Henry stared at her as he considered this, evaluating, calculating, risk assessing. Hattie was doing the same, taking in the blood soaking into the side of his shirt, the sweat dripping down his face, and the wideness of his eyes. "What's your name?" Henry narrowed his eyes at her. "Hadassah. People call me Hattie." No one called the girl by her real name these days, but she told him anyways. "I just thought that you might feel better if you had a cup of water." "Sorry." "Hadassah. Yes, I think a cup of water would help me feel better." "Thank you. Can you get one for me?" Hattie nodded, the weight of her decision settling in. No longer was she glanced over as just another piece of a horde, but now she had been called out. She was in this. It took all of her strength to take the next few steps. All of them brought her closer to a dangerous man who seemingly did not care about her safety. But there was still a little inkling in the back of her mind, a blossom of hope. It slowly bloomed as she poured some water from the tap into a plastic cup and brought it to him. That maybe, just maybe, this would all go to plan. Hope that they would all make it out of this alive. Henry, still suspicious, took the cup from Hattie, but said nothing. She looked back toward the front window, at all the other customers who were looking at her like a madman. Everyone watched with a sort of anticipation as he drank the entire cup greedily. "I need more, please, Hadassah." He handed the cup back to Hattie, and she filled it again, and then gave it back. Once he had drunk his fill, he sent Hattie back to the front of the shop. 45 minutes passed. This time, Hattie's voice shook even more when she stepped forward and said, "Excuse me?" "What is it, Hadassah?" Henry asked, but he didn't point the gun at her. "I'm really very sorry to interrupt you like this, but I couldn't help but notice that you're bleeding. I'm training to be an EMT. I could patch you up, if you'd like." Now, if it had been almost any other person in the cafe who asked this, they would have been turned down. But Hattie had somehow managed to find favor in the eyes of this man, and therefore he nodded. beckoning her forward for the second time. "The first aid kit is behind the counter," Hattie said, pointing. He allowed her to go and get it. And when she had, the two of them sat down at one of the tables and got to work, while Hattie cut his shirt open so she could clean the wound and examine it. Henry kept his gun trained on the front of the store so that no one would try to escape while he was inconvenienced. "You've been kind to me, Hadassah." "Why?" Henry asked. Hattie pushed her glasses up with the back of her wrist. "I don't think that you're a very bad person. I think that sometimes people get mixed up in bad things. Things that grab a hold of them and try to drag them down into the depths of darkness. Sometimes, when something's got a hold of someone, they can't get out on their own. Sometimes, we need to lend a hand to those who are wrestling with evil." "And what if I really am a bad person?" Henry responded. "Well, then, that would make all of us. But there's a difference between a bad person and a bad person who's trying to be better." Hattie threaded some string on a surgical needle. "And if you'll allow me, I'd like to help you with that. I want to be the hand that gives you what you need to win this fight with darkness." It was truly a miracle that she had said all that without tripping on her words or messing up with her stitches. She tied the string off and cut it, then lowered Henry's shirt back down. The injury wasn't what she had been expecting. Honestly, she thought he might have been shot, but it was still a deep scrape that needed patched up. "And how would you do that?" Henry asked, taking her wrist. When he looked at her, Hattie noticed that his eyes were different than they had been. They were searching instead of wandering, passionate instead of crazed. "Help me, I mean." "Well, it could start by the two of us sitting down and having a very serious conversation about what it means to be good or evil and how we can change at all. And then, depending on what you decide, it would probably end with you getting in one of those cop cars and atoning for what you've done up to this point." Henry nodded, and Hattie sat with him, silently asking for wisdom on what she should say. With a steadying breath, she decided to start by explaining the gospel to him, starting at the beginning, like she had been taught to do. She explained how God made the world, made us perfect, but then how we fell into sin. She explained separation from God and what that meant for us in our fallen state. And then she told Henry, who was listening intently, as though this was the only thing he ever had to think about. "Henry, why are we here today? What made you decide to do this?" Hattie asked when she had gone through her spiel. "I got in with some rough people. We did something bad," he said, head in his hands. "Police pulled up, and I didn't want to get caught, so I ran. Figured I could do what they do in the movies and negotiate my escape. Wasn't till I got in here that I remembered." Henry looked up at Hattie, eyes shining with tears. "Bad guy never gets out of the situation in the movies." "Okay." Hattie nodded. "So what's next?" "Everyone goes home," Henry whispered, taking in a shaky breath. "And I go to prison." Hattie stood and turned to the rest of the people in the cafe. And Henry put the gun on the table, away from him. "Go home." Hattie told everyone along the window, smiling. Then she sat back down and faced the criminal before her, asked him how he was feeling, listened intentionally, only to him, while a SWAT team came in and surrounded them both. Henry had long since broken down into tears and was shaking with sobs so hard that he couldn't even hold his hands up in surrender. He didn't protest when they put the cuffs on him and read him his rights, or when he got it in the back of a police car. When it was all over, Hattie put her head down in her arms on the table. She did not anticipate how exhausting it would be to evangelize at gunpoint. Her friends came back in and laid a blanket over her, matching the ones wrapped around them. Shock blankets, they were called. "Hattie, that was so stupid and brave," Carmen said, sitting next to her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just doing what had to be done," Hattie responded, looking up from the table to her friends. "We should go get ice cream," Harper said, then quickly amended, "through the drive-through." Hattie snorted, laughing. "I have ice cream in my dorm room. Come on." The four girls left the cafe and drove to the college, each separately praying a little prayer of gratitude on the drive over, and then finished their Bible study in the comfort of Hattie's living room, with bowls of chocolate ice cream next to them. When Henry's trial came 2 weeks later, Hattie attended. She watched him plead guilty and apologize to the people he had hurt. She didn't visit him in prison, but wrote him letters of encouragement every once in a while. When he wrote back that he had become a Christian, she shared it with everyone in her church. Overjoyed, after a year or so, the four girls decided to try the coffee shop again. And so now, every week for the past 10 weeks, Hattie, along with a new friend named Maya, has gone to the little family-owned cafe for a Bible study with a few of her friends from church. She'd walk in and hear the quiet, uplifting music and the gentle bustle of the few people inside, and smell the fresh ground coffee beans and vanilla. Then Maya and Hattie would see Carmen, who had dyed her blonde hair bright orange since last week, and Harper with her new engagement ring, and Marissa, who was now pregnant. And they'd sit and talk and read and pray, just as they expected to do for the next 10 weeks. Heartbeat of the home. Why can't I remember? He thought. His mind would only reveal flashes of the afternoon's events. His head was on fire, sweat dripping down his face, like an addict on autopilot. Grant Liscombe burst through the front door, avoiding his mother in the kitchen. Like a spider returning to its web, his lanky teenage legs scurried up the wooden stairs of the old farmhouse to his bedroom. His arms flailed with uncontrollable fear as he yanked the dirt-covered shirt over his head, discarded it on the floor, then bounded to the bathroom, slamming the door. "What have I done? What have I done?" he muttered, lathering the perfumed soap through his fingers, frantic to wash the guilt from his newly calloused hands, watching the streaks of dirt dance and swirl down the rusty drain. His mind was confused by broken images of helping to clean the gutters, the ladder falling. Or was it pushed? The thud as Nick's body hit the ground, and the gleam of the metal shovel as Grant dug the body-sized hole. He confronted the reflection in the mirror, the gaunt, bloodshot, black-haired punk he had become. "Oh God, what have you done?" The reflection glared back with an evil grin. It began about a month ago, after his factory worker stepfather, Nick, lost his job. Grant's middle-aged mother, Jane, with little work experience, was initially grateful for the offer to stay at her aunt's derelict house, remotely located in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario. Soon, she would regret it. They arrived late on an October evening, rain pelting down. The overwhelming stench of mold and decay nauseated Grant as he stepped onto the porch, past two white rattan chairs resembling broken skeleton bones. Like two cracked teeth, the front window panes whistled as Nick opened the door, and a rush of twisted oak leaves fluttered into the foyer, landing at the base of an antique grandfather clock. "Wow, look at that beauty," Grant exclaimed, smitten with the intricate carvings of the mahogany cabinet, the shiny gold filigree face, moon dial, and hands, all in pristine condition, a sharp contrast to the rest of the house. "Hey, Mom, didn't Grandpa have a clock like this?" He set down his backpack, rubbed his hands over the smooth, flawless finish, inhaling the rich smell of lacquer and lemon polish, opened the case to wind the weights, then set the hands to the correct time. "Yes, he did," she answered, removing her coat and shaking the rain from her short blonde hair. "But not as old as this one. Remember what Grandpa always said? The tick of a clock is the heartbeat of the home," they repeated in unison, their heartfelt laughter filling the room with his memory. "But seriously, Grant," she said, pointing at the clock. "That thing gives me the creeps," Grant shrugged. Then, as he tapped the pendulum to start the clock, he felt a sudden chill in the air, a quiver in the continuum of space and time. The walls around him seemed to expand and contract, like the lungs of the house had taken a deep breath. "Are you all right, Grant?" His mother's face concerned. "You look pale." "He's fine," said Nick. "Quit coddling him, Jane. He isn't a child anymore." he chuckled, and gently kissed her forehead. "I'll finish bringing in the rest of the stuff." Grant sensed something was terribly wrong. Something had taken control of his body. His mind shouted with fear as his consciousness slipped deeper into an abyss, and a different, cunning voice answered. "I'm okay, Mom." After the family had settled in for the night, the clock softly chimed the midnight hour, and its demon contemplated setting its evil plans in motion. Returning to his room, Grant changed into clean clothes and put on some loud, heavy metal music. He suspected his mother was having issues with his new identity. He began rifling through his closet, not sure what he was looking for. Then, at last, he found it. The metal slugger baseball bat. As he held the handle, he confirmed that Mother was next. "Grant," his mother called from the kitchen, aroma of roast beef wafting up the stairs. "Are you guys done outside? Dinner's almost ready." The stairs creaked with warning as he descended each step. Slow and deliberate, bat at the ready. A satanic song blared out of his room, the heavy bass pounding the walls. Thump, thump, thump. "Turn it down," she shouted, stirring the gravy pot, steam filling the room from the whistling kettle. But his music grew louder. He continued his mission, unhindered. From deep inside, Grant could feel the raw hatred of the demon inhabiting his body, its cruel intention, but was powerless to intervene. Suddenly, like a beacon of light through the darkness, he heard a familiar voice. "Remember the heartbeat of the home." It was Grandpa. "Grant," the voice said, "kill the heartbeat." Jane Liscombe turned off the stove and stormed out of the kitchen, down the hall, stopping at the grandfather clock at the base of the stairwell. "I said, turn it." Stopping mid-sentence, she screamed and jumped back, just as the bat came crashing down, barely missing its target. Grant gripped tighter, then swung again, this time hitting a home run as the bat smashed the glass of the grandfather clock, dislodging the pendulum and sending it flying across the room. The chimes clanged noisily in pain as he swung again and again until the battered clock showed no signs of life. Grant's grandfather's undying love had helped him overcome the demon within him and return to H.'s former self. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to hold her, just as Nick came limping through the front door, rubbing his head. "Nick, you're alive!" Grant shouted in surprise and relief, running to hug him. "Nick, are you all right?" "What happened?" Jane asked, still badly shaken. "I thought he was holding the ladder," he said angrily. "Must have fallen and knocked myself out." He looked around in disbelief at the shards of glass and pieces of wood scattered on the floor. "What the hell happened here? I'll explain in the car. We've got to leave. Now," Grant exclaimed as he helped Nick and his mother out of the house. They drove to the nearest motel never to return. 2 years later, a young couple turned the key in the tarnished brass lock of their newly rented farmhouse in the Halliburton Hills, and as the war sunlight shone into the foyer, a spectacular sight was revealed. A beautiful mahogany grandfather clock, bloody tea leaves, and fucking coffee beans. They banned folks from toting teapots and kettles, classifying them as weapons of war. Frank remembers clearly that day, the day Dictator-in-Chief declared a state of emergency. Remembers all the stooges and quislings who clapped. Remembers the collective liberal orgasm, and how the elites, academics, and cultural icons collectively smirked. Then came the run-of-the-mill anecdotes, soldiers whose scalded limbs had been, or had to be, amputated. Women whose lives had been altered because the long arm of the law couldn't prevent their partners from keeping tea leaves and coffee beans on their shelves, under pillows, and in their pockets everywhere they went. Even children were paraded about, exploited as a major reason tea and coffee had to be abolished from both street corner and corner cafe. Of course, Starbucks and Dunkin's went into a frenzy. Their lobbyists and plants in press rooms went to town. They were neither alone nor wrong. Frank and other tea addicts and coffee fiends went into overdrive too. Government officials, armed to the teeth, retaliated, confiscating cups, teapots, and everything construed as having the potential for making tea. Even bloody spoons. He fought back when they kicked his front door in. He was made a prisoner under the law, but worse, under a presumptuous therapist. 2. You think I'm crazy, don't you? You think I'm all bonkers? What makes you think I think that, Frank? That you just did it. What did I do? Tried to be clever. People like you? People like me? Yes. Like you. Yes. Like my wife. Educated. Yet godless. People like me loathe people like you as much as you hate us, she asked incessantly, and prodded deeper. He eventually talked about war, about his role in the last one, and about man in general, and the eternal romance between him and war. He licked his lips and rubbed his hands together as he spoke. You want to know why man keeps to war, Miss Hatina? She nodded. War don't file for divorce. She choked on her own saliva. We'll come to your ex-wife later. Let's stick to the war for now. They talked about it briefly. A lukewarm room becoming warmer. If you've never watched a friend's head split in half, you've no reason to sit there and tell me about this BPST nonsense. All this PTSD, whatever the creature's name is called. I saw real creatures, fought real dragons. Death was both my enemy and soulmate. She sat there and listened, and listened, and listened. With 7 minutes on the clock remaining, she finally cleared her throat. I don't understand everything you went through, Frank, and I'll never pretend to. My job is only to help. He nodded. She continued. Because there's some good place in your soul, Frank. I want you to lead me there. Meanwhile, I'll be interpreting the road signs as we encounter them for you. Do you want me to come along? He smiled. The soldiers guarding his fort chose to lower both sword and spear. I guess you, the 6-foot-something battle-hardened soldier in the arena of the mind, Miss Hatina, you're correct. But since we'll be walking to a faraway place together, I guess you can call me Rose. Rumor had it I'd be talking to a Mrs. something. She showed him the finger where a ring used to be, and Frank, well, beamed. 3. They banned them from toting teacups, spoons, sugar basins, and so forth. That's why you won't find them on Main Street anymore. Starbucks was shut down. Dunkin's will follow soon, unless they agree to sell frappes and ice cream exclusively. Beverages that don't burn women and children. Frank finds himself in a maze, zigzagging his way in the slippery alleyways of downtown Kiwagama to quench his craving for the hot stuff, a thirst he contracted on the front lines. Dilapidated buildings cry through rusty gutters. Neon lights stutter like a car with insufficient dinosaur juice. A black cat meows and crosses in front of him. A dog howls at the thinnest slice of moon cosmically possible. A drunk slips. His bottle turns to powder in a muddy puddle. Steam rises from a manhole. Dear steam. A whiff of it dances towards the moon like an apparition. A shadow appears from around the corner and whistles at Frank. He follows. Not long after, an iron door gaps its jaws open and swallows Frank and his guide. Men with steaming teapots and kettles on the verge of hissing surround him. The spouts are longer than Pinocchio's nose after his girlfriend asks how she looks in some silly Halloween costume. Salt water germinates from his every pore, and his bladder tightens as they frisk him. Satisfied, they conceal their beverage brewers in their roomy jackets. He's led up a staircase whose stairwells are carpeted by needles, broken bottles, and used condoms. The air is damp and putrid. Steam rises. Steam, steam, steam. He shivers from steam that refuses to be blown off. Steam that, left unchecked, will one day be sufficient to power a dystopian locomotive. A CCTV camera buzzes. Feet are dragged towards the door. Crimson light radiates from a peephole before the deadbolt clinks. "Come in," says a tall, broad-shouldered fellow with a huge scar waiting to spring from under his long beard and show its fangs. For, in every session thereafter, she helped him paint a picture. He talked about war, asked about university. She painted the experience in mostly positive terms. "Loads of hookups?" he said. They were getting too cozy. "Not enough," she answered with pouted lips. "I noticed a hickey on your neck the other day, coupled with what you just told me. Is that why you broke up? Cold intimacy, the lack thereof? Frank, This is all I'm going to say about this. I was once upon a time a happily married woman, until I wasn't. Well, that makes two of us, if it makes you feel better. You see, I might not have fought a war, but we've so much in common than you think. He beamed. Do we now? I believe all humans have. What really happened, Rose? I understand the power dynamic here, but even Mussolini dangled carrots. She laughed. Okay then. We got lazy, grew tired, and drifted apart. He blames me, and I blame him. You've kids? No, Frank, we don't. Do you date? She froze and cursed herself for being sidetracked so easily. Tell me about your upbringing, Frank. He talked about his childhood stammer, about his first crush, then opened up about his father. All my friends had their dads present growing up. They went fishing, threw ball, showed up at games. What did I have? An absent dad and absent-minded mother whose descriptions of my pops when we had conversations about him were pretty ugly. Basically, called him a brute. After which she'd tell me I was my father's child whenever I did something. Like what? Hit someone in the head with a bat. She jotted something in her notebook. He started to realize on his own how the heat of life and circumstance has been bringing him to a boil ever since childhood. No wonder he felt like exploding and powering steam engines while at it. He talked about how he found himself in a vortex of alcohol, syringes, and women with brown teeth and skimpy clothes as soon as he hit puberty. Why do you think you went there? She said, sipping hot beverage he said he'd never been a fan of. Truthfully, bigger boys convinced us smaller ones. That was what being a man was all about. But you didn't like it? Well, you know even hell has its moments, I'd wager. She chuckled. What changed? An STI. She giggled some. He saw it and chuckled wryly. I realized being a man doesn't always mean you should die early or pointlessly. Like, if you're gonna die early anyway, like I always felt I would. Why not spend your short life in the defense of others? You became a man, definitely. Served my country, came back, got married, had a kid. Then she left with another man. A long pause in which all the sound heard was sipping and stirring of tea. But ironically, the steam which rose to the ceiling and covered the room in a wasn't from the beverage. It was from the purple reservoir of his emotions. She'd to turn the air conditioner on. After his kettle stopped whistling, she ventured. How did that make you feel? That I should have died in the war. What about now? Sweaty, hot, fuming, jealous. I don't know. You're lying to me, Frank. Redness reappeared on Frank's face. I feel like shit, if you really want to know. Why? That's what I'm here to understand, ain't it? I'm here to help. Just. It alternates between I screwed up, my wife screwed me over by screwing some screw up, or the screw up who screwed my wife screwed me over. My mind ain't sure what to hold on to. Ex-wife now, Frank. Remember, She's water under the bridge now. A thick vein popped on the man's forehead. She was stolen from me. She made a choice, Frank. His voice brewed a purple storm. They took the house. My fucking house. By law, Frank. Frank threw the notebook on his lap at the window. It sublimated into shards. He pushed the couch back violently and wagged his fist at thin air. They took my daughter from me. Is that the law, too? No? Yes? Well, I'll tell you what. The law is wrong for taking my daughter away from me. The law is bloody wrong. 5. The dealer finishes a call before his attention turns to Frank. 2 ladies flank him on either side, gyrating slightly to the thumping of 808s coming from an adjoining room. There's a bouncer on each of the 4 corners of the makeshift office space. My boy, Frankie. When my boys told me about you, ain't believed shit they said. Said you was a big man now. Told them every big man's working for me since the ban. He laughs. But here you are. You done become bigger than a hippo. In good ways, of course. Thanks, Bobo. What if I make you offer? Huh? For old time's sake. Frank fidgets excessively. What offer? Come work for me. There's good money here. Big, fat money to be made. An older lady brings Kraus whiskey in 2 glasses. With all due respect, Bobo, says Frank soon after the lady leaves. Ain't looking for no job. The room goes taut. So why's you here, Frankie? They take turns to sip the old man's health. Frank's gaze darts about. For, you know, the thing? Frankie, don't try to be clever with me. I know you here for the hot stuff. But why is what I ask you? Because, Bobo, only you knows how to get things like that. Bobo smiles proudly. What you want the hottie-hottie for? Self-defense. There's an entire ministry of, I trust my own fingers than the entire ministry. Bobo laughs and claps his hands. Perfect. Had to test you to see whether you bulk under pressure or not. I only deal with solid folk. He regards Frank for a bit. The latter breathes heavily. Steam blows out of his ears and nose like a malfunctioning toy dragon. But he keeps still. I ain't one to judge. But anger breeds nothing. Frankie, nothing. Forget that woman. You come work with me. There's plenty of women to pass around here. See all this? Plenty. Does the package you suggesting include my daughter? Bobo gestures for something to be brought into the room. He does the sign of the cross. Anger burns you, Frankie boy. You, not nobody else. God won't say, I didn't warn y'alls. They bring the man his order. A collector's wet dream. Like one of those brewing pots Grandpa used to keep, and Grandma used to pester him about. Why you don't keep it as far away from reach as possible. You want your grandkids to be caught up in that life too? Grandpa had a well-known addiction for the stimulant. He'd a lot of scars to show for the burns he'd endured over the years. Because anytime's tea time. That's why. Looks good alrighty, Frankie? Frank nods. Good. But where's the coffee beans? Where's the what? I'm sorry. I'm used to calling, aha! Coffee beans. I think I know what coffee beans is. Gary, you get it too? One of the bodyguards nods when the dealer looks at him. He turns back to Frank. You a clever buggeros, Frankie. Pity you don't want work. We could use some creativity here. Martin, you brought this man a pot of steaming nothing, you see? Bring the man his bloody tea leaves and fucking coffee beans. Money exchanges hands. So does a brown paper bag in the opposite direction. Frank starts to leave. Remember, don't spill the beans about me, Frankie, or my men will spill something hot on your baby girl. And unlike you, I'm a very literal man. 6. They texted and laughed and looked each other in the eye. When they looked each other in the eye long enough, the hands of her eyes pulled his face closer. Space between them crumbled. Their faces rammed into each other's. Sparks flew. Passions exploded into groaning, screaming, and orgasms. They met at the office to talk about demons, online to flirt, and at her place to talk about the future. She showed him a diary she kept when she was 6. He noticed a particular motif. On every other page was a rough sketch of a girl carrying things like knives, razors, guns, and catapults. You wanted to hurt someone? Frank said, after kissing her bare chest. Kill someone. Well, did you succeed? Not that I'm aware of. Who are all these people? Everyone. I hated everyone. My sis was too pretty. My cousin was too liked. Hannah Montana was too popular. She's in here? Flip a page. Again. There she is. God, you were so twisted. What changed? She sighed. A ballpoint pen and a teapot. What? We'd a bully at school. A boy who got away with everything. One time, I snapped and sunk my bic in his face. God, yeah. It was atrocious. Got me expelled. Mom thought I'd learnt my lesson. Grandma thought not. She boiled water in a kettle and called me over. Made me stretch my hands towards the pot. Don't tell me she poured hot water on your hands. Fingers. Yeah, that's a lot better. She's like, every time you let your anger boil over and think about hurting someone, think about this kettle. Today, I'm the one pouring hot water on you. But one day, it will be the world. I'm trying to understand her philosophy, but what does that even mean? Our anger hurts us as much as, or more than, it hurts the people we lash out at. When I'm angry, I think about how much hot water I'm pouring on myself. And it works all the time. Flip a page, again. There you go. That's you in a kitchen. That's me carrying the proverbial teapot. I substituted it for my weapons. Sketched it over a knife or a razor. You can do it too. I'm an army man. They recently banned my kind of weapon. Well, I know you know where to get one if you really wanted it. Please think about my grandma's metaphor and me when you think about hurting anyone ever again. You will? I will. They kissed. His hand rested on a breast. Someone opened the door, saw them digging gems out of each other, and dropped the flower bouquet he carried. She leapt from Frank's lap and rushed after him. 7. Above all else, Frank hates liars. The only person he hates more than he who generally lies is he who lies specifically to him, and everyone seems to take advantage of his willingness to give the benefit of doubt. Politicians lied about the war, about its purpose. Now they're lying about the purpose of some laws. But politicians are known to lie. Who believes politicians anyway, in this day and age? His father said he was going around the block. He never returned. Mother lied about why he chose to do that. To save face, his wife. Don't people take "till death do us part" literally anymore? Then there's Rose. No, she's the therapist now. She was cheating on her husband, with him no less, making him no better than his wife's. She's your ex-wife now, lover. You don't do that. And now she's trying to call. He's not picking that. What for? More bullshit? He languishes in his car, busy brewing. 6 tea bags in a kettle, 6 coffee beans in a coffee machine. He turns the knobs to boil until the lid starts dancing and the spout sputtering. A police siren wails. The cabin turns icy. They pass. Steam resumes. He cocks them both. Oops, better stay with Grandma's metaphor. But it's slipping. They banned these from ever finding their way into hands like his. Because of this, he sees them. He sees her. A hot spring blasts the crown of his head. He's out. He's striding. They see him. Too late. Kettle hisses, then regurgitates. It starts raining on him too. Torrential rainfall at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Clock is a tickin'. Freeze, jabroni. Don't make a move. Carl almost burst out laughing until he turned around and saw the camouflage gear-festooned, rodent-faced man pointing what could only be a large-caliber handgun directly at him. I told you don't make a move. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back, shrilled the man with the gun. Carl, a tall, thin, balding man with blue eyes, was no longer in a laughing mood. In fact, a sense of ice-cold terror was trickling down his spine. He'd never had a gun pointed at him before. Teetering on the edge of panic, Carl asked the armed man, "Just to be clear, do you want me to freeze and remain still, or turn around and place my arms behind my—" "Shut up, jabroni! Just do what you're told, and nobody gets hurt," barked the gunman. But Carl saw a cloud of confusion pass over the man's rat-like face. Immediately, Carl instinctively knew the man had never pointed a gun at anyone before, and that knowledge placed them on a level playing field, at least to a certain extent. "Hey, look, man, I don't have any problems with you," Carl said as calmly as he could. "I'm just here. Look, my wife got me a new tarp for our trailer for Christmas, and I'm just here to strip off the old tarp and throw the new one on. Who are you, anyway? Carl's trailer was parked next to the Skookumchuck River in a remote, rural area of Washington State. Beautiful in the summer, but right now, it was December 27th, and freezing rain was dripping from the slate-gray sky onto the small collection of aging recreational vehicles parked along the muddy banks of the Skookumchuck. I got no problems with you either, provided you're not a Fed. Now show me some ID. The armed man was still barking orders, but it was clear that the burst of adrenaline was waning, and his voice had lost its threatening edge. Quit pointing that gun at me, and let me get my driver's license, okay? What's your name, anyway? And what are you doing here? Carl said, as he showed the man his Oregon driver's license. You went across state lines, huh? Not a bad idea. Well, shit. I guess we gotta stick together in desperate times anyways, don't we? The name's Victor, but you can call me Vic. Damn nice to meet you, Carl. Sorry I was less than welcoming, but you know how it is. Vic said, tucking his pistol into his pants and drawing the back of his hand across his nose before offering Carl a manly handshake. This here's my trailer, Vic said, casting his head toward an RV about 20 feet from Carl's. Well, technically, it belongs to my Uncle Kevin, but he's too damn old and doesn't truly appreciate the magnitude of the threat. Carl took a deep breath. Suddenly, he felt somewhat restored to his equilibrium. He knew Kevin. Shit. Carl had been parking his trailer in these woods for about 16 years. He was at least casually acquainted with the other campers and fishermen who frequented the site. As Carl internalized the vital information that Vic wasn't just some random lunatic or escaped convict, he said, "Holy hell, Vic. I know old Kev. Known him for years. Wait, the magnitude of... What is this threat you're referring to?" Vic went still, and his hand wandered to his waistband, where the gun was tucked away. He gave Carl a skeptical stare, and then silently assessed their surroundings. The gentle roar of the river was a backdrop for the occasional chirp of a bird. But otherwise, all was silent. Vic's eyes flickered up into the evergreens and peered into the underbrush, but nothing moved. There was no breeze, and the rain was just a mist that hung in the air, along with the scent of moss. Carl belatedly realized that Vic had been out in the woods for a while. His jawline was scruffy, and the pores on his nose were black and visible. Dirt was caked under his fingernails, and his hair was stingy and greasy. "What threat?" Vic hissed. "You playing games with me, Carl? Because you wouldn't be out here if you weren't keyed in, and I don't appreciate being toyed with. No. That's not what I meant. Listen, I'm just trying to understand your assessment of the threat, Vic. We need to share intel If we are gonna get a handle on the... Shit, man. You want some beef jerky? Carl asked, as he yanked a packet of Jack Links out of his pocket and tore it open. Vic accepted a hunk of jerky and gestured that Carl would follow him to his trailer. After about a dozen steps, Vic stopped in his tracks and surveilled the tree line for snipers. But soon enough, they were ensconced in the comfy confines of the almond beige wood paneling in old Kev's RV, chewing jerky and discussing strategy. Soundgarden issued softly from the tape deck as Vic chuckled and said, "Leave it to the computer nerds to completely disregard the obvious fact that we are gonna run out of digits. Goddamn educated idiots is what I call, hello?" Vic could do a pretty accurate Jerry Seinfeld impression. "Sweet fancy Moses. Yeah, but what'll happen? What's gonna happen when the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve?" Carl asked, and Vic just shook his head and said, "Boom. Digital apocalypse. We run out of digits. Think about it. Our entire lives, ever since the invention of computers, we've been running on 2 digits. Wait, what?" Carl said. "There are shitloads of digits, like 8 or 9 at least." "Let me ask you this," Vic said, leaning forward. "What year did you graduate high school?" "Class of 94, Carl said. "And the year you were born?" Vic insisted, leaning closer. 75. "What's your point?" Carl said, confused. "My point? My point?" Vic said, locking Carl in his beady gaze. "My point is that when we go from 99 to 2000, boom, digital apocalypse, brah. Nobody has ever thought of the consequences. There are no guardrails in place, no safety net, Carl. Think about it." Realization dawned on Carl as he said, "Vic, how the fuck did you figure all this out? Do you work for the CIA or something?" Vic just chuckled and slowly shook his head. "Ever heard of dial-up internet jabroni? My parents have it in my dad's office in the basement. Let's just say it's not just for email and porn anymore. I've done my own research." "Fuck," Carl muttered, collapsing back into his chair. "Do you think my ATM card will stop working?" "I'm afraid it's much worse than that, amigo," Vic whispered. "It's effectively a Mayan calendar scenario. The end is upon us, and we are gonna need to be prepared." The fucking Mayan calendar?" Carl, suddenly animated, exclaimed as he threw his truck keys to Vic. "All hands on deck, Vic. You are the wheelman. I'll watch your 6. We need to get down to the 7-Eleven before dark, fuel up the rig, and load up on ammunition. 10-4. "Carl," Vic said over his shoulder, but he skittered to a stop just before they reached the truck, grabbed Carl by the front of his jacket, and said, "We are gonna need a lot more of this jerky, Carl. We need to sequester as many more packs of Jack Links as we can. Do you read me? I read you loud and clear, good buddy. Now let's get to gettin'. Clock is tickin', jabroni. Clock is a tickin'. T for 3. Checking the day's schedule, Maud looked forward to meeting her first-time client, Silesia. Her daily prep included the wide variety of tea blends sufficient to the day's demands. Maud called her social events pours. Modeled after the traditional Japanese tea ceremony, she aimed deeper than mere tranquility. Her delicious, blended teas reoriented her clients' views of themselves and the world. She tailored each concoction individually by adding herbs and essential oils. Every ingredient was organic and non-toxic. Of course, it was all legal. Maud acquired her skill by studying under a Peruvian shaman for a decade. Her second scheduled client called himself Ted, not his real name. Maud hadn't met him, but she knew him well. A columnist at the local newspaper, he was her most strident critic. Maud intended to reorient Ted's views, good and hard. Ted and other critics claimed Maud ran a cult. She scoffed at such descriptions. They've obviously never attended my tea parties. Clients choose to return. They're not compelled. She maintained a low public profile. Finding self-promotion distasteful, Maud didn't advertise. She didn't need to. Word of mouth brought most of her clients seeking relief from a life out of balance. They generally left happy. Critics wondered why no one in City Hall cared to lift her veil of secrecy. Maud dismissed rumors, claiming she was a close confidant of politicians and society mavens. Maud admitted to modifying the tea ceremony into something unique. Her pours were for anyone seeking to rebalance. The pours logo was a modified yin-yang symbol, depicted as floating within the bowl of a bamboo spoon. She didn't tell fortunes, wasn't a guru, and didn't run a seance, nor was she a matchmaker, though some had found love after meeting through her. That was serendipity at play, not Maud. Maud also adamantly rejected the term therapist. She firmly rejected suggestions her pours were a form of group therapy. She abhorred insinuations that she practiced without a license. As the appointed time for this day's pour approached, Maud prepared a special tea for Ted. Not knowing Silesia's needs and temperament, she waited. Her standard blends would do until she knew more. Maud resisted temptation regarding Ted. Poison was an option to which she refused to stoop. But she had prepared something special for him. Maud was confident that when Ted left the pour, his attitude would be radically different from the one he brought. With a few minutes before the pour, Maud sat in silence, with her hands folded. The bell rang. Maud opened the door to Silesia, wearing a short, strapless sundress and a broad-brimmed straw hat. Silesia thrust out her hand. Maud? Yes, welcome to my pour. Maud waved her in and saw Ted coming up the walk in a suit and tie. She introduced herself and led them to the dedicated pour room. Silesia talked rapidly. "It's such a beautiful day. Perfect for a little tea, don't you think?" Maud nodded. Ted lagged behind, taking note of the decor and the layout of the house. Silesia continued without pausing for breath. "But it's so beautiful. A shame to spend it cooped up inside. I love going down to the river walk and watching the ducks and the boats and the birds flying overhead. The trees make such lovely shade, and each fluttering leaf responds to every slight breeze. Is there any way we can reschedule? I hate to waste the day inside." Once in the room, Maud indicated where they should sit. "Well, you're here now. We won't be all day, bright and shadowless." The pour room had no windows. No pictures adorned the walls, which had climbing vines painted on them. A ficus tree stood in one corner. A low table sat amidst plush pillows. A table beside Maud had a gas fire, teapots, space for preparation, and teacups. Silesia and Ted did a little dance, trying to decide who should sit where. Maud pointed and said, "No, Silesia there. Ted, please sit here." They sat. Silesia giggled like a little girl. Ted's face shifted between annoyance and boredom. Maud prepared the tea with bamboo utensils and served them each a cup. She said, "This first cup should relax you. Take a moment to enjoy. Sip carefully. It's hot." Silesia downed the cup in one gulp and screamed as she spit it out. She grabbed a napkin and wiped tea off herself and the table. "Wow, sorry, that was hot." Ted rolled his eyes. The first serving of tea was intended to break the ice. Maud never wanted clients to think of their poor experience as akin to riding in an elevator. They were past that. Whatever their stated purpose, Maud sensed subtle emotional currents at work. Her blends worked to rebalance each person, regardless their emotional state. Wanting the tea to bring everyone into a state of calm, she poured them another cup. She leaned toward Silesia. "Are you okay?" "It's hot." "Hot. Right. Got the message." Silesia blew on the cup and sipped. "Oh, this is good." Maud turned to Ted. "And how are you, Ted?" Startled from his reverie, Ted took a moment. He reined in his disdain for what he thought an elaborate charade. "This is different from the expected traditional tea ceremony." "Oh, what have you heard?" "I never tell people to expect that." "Well, to start," he pointed at Silesia, "this badly dressed, classless woman is rude, won't stop talking, doesn't carry a fan." Silesia scowled and rummaged through her purse. Pulling out a battery-operated fan, she switched it on. The little propeller spun, blowing strands of her hair back. With eyes fluttering, she smiled at the breeze in her face. Giggling, she aimed it at Ted, blocking the draft with his hands. He said, "Never mind. Turn it off. Keep it to yourself." Silesia winked at Maud and, giggling, returned the fan to her purse. Ted said, "So much for tranquility. This is my point. How do you dare pretend this tattered facade is a tea ceremony? You exhibit only the shallowest grasp of time-honored rituals. This is just a load of frayed, new-age claptrap hiding behind the trappings of a traditional tea ceremony. I'm sorry, my pores have been misrepresented. Would you like more tea? I mean, where's the respect, the purity, and the reverence?" Maud held her look. After a moment, he held his cup out. He wouldn't let go when Maud tried to take it. Careful not to burn him, she refilled his cup. "It's hot, I know." He gave Silesia a stern look and brushed off his leg. Maud noticed that Silesia had begun to fidget. She declined more tea. "Silesia, tell us what brings you here," she sighed. "It's all about my roommates. They aren't pets, but they're hamsters." "Well, about 6 months ago, I was feeling lonely in my beautiful, spacious apartment. So I bought a couple of friends. Hate to have to buy a friend. Seems so entitled, but can't exactly meet a hamster at the local club." Maud nodded. Ted rolled his eyes. He whispered, "Can't you shut her up?" Everything was cool for a while. We got on famously. But then one day, I came home and discovered an extra dozen of the little critters. Who knew? All in one cage? Appalled, Silesia practically shouted, "Oh, no! I would never cage my friends. What do you take me for?" Agitated, Ted said, But is right. That was only the beginning. I've lost count. And that isn't even the worst part. Neither Maud nor Ted wanted to hear the worst. I discovered that they ate one of them. Maud nodded impassively. "Yes, but nothing. I admit, I'm not that bothered that his family ate their baby brother. I mean, get real. Babies do get eaten. But poor little Jimmy. I'll never forget when I found little Jimmy was the hamster." Silesia looked at Ted like he was a lunatic. "Focus, Ted. The circle of life and all that. I miss him." "And," Maud said, "yes, I cannot get over." She dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Maud and Ted leaned in. "After everything I did, just can't believe that they ate meat." Ted feigned a coughing fit to cover his laughter. Silesia waited for it to subside. "I mean, what did I do wrong? How could they? Didn't I raise them right? You know, to be vegetarian. I thought they were. I didn't skimp in sympathy." Maud touched Silesia's right hand. She covered Maud's with her left. Maud placed her free hand on top of Silesia's. Misty-eyed, they turned to Ted. He said, "Looks like you're first at bat, Maud." They didn't understand. He said, "So, is this it? Sorry, but I have to get on with my day." Maud straightened up. "No, Ted. Now that we're in sync with each other, I'll serve another tea. One made for you alone. A special tea? Just for me? Oh, boy. Maud resisted trying to kill Ted. She wouldn't poison him. At least, not in the usual way. But I'm not about to let this hack destroy everything I've built. She wanted Ted's comeuppance, not his life. This potion would take his words, silence him, at least for a few days. He said, "So what's in this special tea?" "Hold the cyanide." Only he laughed. Maud said, "I can't reveal my secret recipe, but it contains a mixture of frankincense, sandalwood, ylang ylang, rose, pepperum. I could go on. You get the idea." Ted and Silesia were awed at the complexities of Maud's preparations, and Silesia, don't feel left out. I've also designed a special blend for you. They sat expectantly. Maud poured Ted's tea from a pot she'd set aside and handed him the small porcelain cup. He reached out, but stopped. Putting his hand up, he shook his head. "No thanks. The cup is chipped. I'll pass." Maud recovered. "You don't understand, Ted. It's not a chip. Only an irregularity in the glaze. These rare cups are highly prized, eagerly sought for." Ted couldn't care less. Silesia watched, fascinated. Maud continued, "You've heard of the Japanese tradition of mending a broken bowl with a vein of gold lining the crack? This is similar," Silesia said. "Oh, don't waste it. Give it to me." She reached out, "But it wasn't made for you. It's Ted's. Don't worry. I'll manage. It sounds delicious." This had never happened before. And this tea was pivotal to Maud's plan. She said, "If you insist." Ted said, "We all do." Silesia took Ted's cup, sipped, and smiled. Beginning to speak, she stopped and could only say, "More?" Not used to losing control, Maud refreshed Silesia's cup. Ted smiled at Silesia. "Ah, miss, the power of the well-chosen word." Silesia nodded, but could say nothing. Ted turned to Maud and said, "Good. You shut her up. At last." "I'll have some too," Maud said. "Yes, you need something. I can't have you go thirsty." Deftly switching pots, she poured him a cup of calming tea. They each smiled as he took the cup. He raised it in a mock toast and sipped. "Wow, that's delicious." He loosened his tie. "Maybe you sensed this, Maud, with your acute observational powers. I need to tell you, I write a column at the paper. Commentary, reviews, opinions on the world at large." He leaned forward and took Maud's hand. "I am happy to say you've earned yourself a glowing review," Maud replied. "Ted, you? A writer?" "I had no idea." She refilled his cup with tea, promoting a positive attitude. Go with the flow, she thought. Silesia remained silent. Ted waxed poetic. Tranquility reigned. Collection day. The hovercraft roared over the tree line, hulking steel against a bruised gray sky. The rotors thrashed, a violent, mechanical pulse, as the collectors, clad in shiny black armor, spilled out onto the cracked earth. "Collection Day," Commander Hu sang, his voice crackling through the comm system and echoing through the steel hull. Khufu stood fast and readied his weapon. The door opened with a hiss as early morning sunlight poured inside. "Unload!" Commander Hu called. Their boots thudded and pounded the floor, first steel and then earth, as the villagers beyond cowered behind huts and crates. The collectors burst forth from the hovercraft like terrible ants, busy and bustling. They moved with ruthless efficiency. One yanked a sack of withered potatoes from a woman's trembling hands. Another snatched a clay pot, its contents spilling onto the dust, staining it a muddy brown. Khufu watched, his stomach clenching. This was once his home. None of them knew that, of course. When you joined the collectors, any life you once had was washed away like soot in the rain. He'd been on more than a dozen of these runs, more than a dozen collection days, each of them vicious, but none like this. Then he saw her, Willow. She stood apart, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance he remembered so well. Even after all this time, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was Willow, unbent, unbeaten, untamed. Thunder crashed in the distance as a wave of memories crashed over him. It was a collection day, like this one, many years ago. The sun beat down on their bare backs as the two of them, scrawny saplings in a field of oaks, snuck through the tall grass. Mrs. Rosen had fallen ill, so they had hidden away a few armfuls of food and medicine, and were determined to find a place to hide before the hovercraft left. Willow had a knack for hiding. She was always the last caught in hide and seek. But on this day, something gave them away. Perhaps the swaying of the grass as they crawled through it. "Who's there?" A collector's shout, sharp as a blade, shattered the quiet. Fear, cold and slick, slid down Khufu's spine. He glanced at Willow, her eyes wide and dark. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed silently. Then he stood up, his arms raised. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my aunt. She's sick." "Come here," the collector barked. Khufu stepped forward carefully as Willow crouched frozen. There were some words exchanged, but Khufu could never recall them. Collectors did not permit explanations or negotiations. They dealt only in force. They pummeled him, each blow a dull thud against his ribs, his back, his skull. Then, as he blood mixed with the dirt beneath him, they gathered the food and medicine and marched away. But Willow, hidden amongst the stalks, was safe. "She's a feisty one," a collector crackled. Khufu stared back at him as a light rain began tapping on their helmets. Willow, cornered, lashed out. Her small fist connected with a collector's arm, a surprising show of strength. The other collectors swarmed her. One grabbed her arms from behind as another lifted his weapon, ready to strike her. But Willow reared back like a bucking horse and kicked hard, her foot cracking his visor. He dropped his rifle and staggered back. Enough, a deep voice sounded. Commander Hu approached, the red cape of his rank swimming behind him. What's going on here? The girl is resistant, a collector reported. Hu studied her for a moment. Another cry of thunder roared out as the rain fell harder. Hu's cape billowed as he turned on his heel. Execute her, Hu said, his voice flat. He looked at Khufu. You do it. Khufu's heart hammered against his ribs. Feeling his hands tremble, he quickly stood straight and nodded. He walked toward Willow, each step heavy. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea, felt the mud squelch beneath his boots. It's you, she whimpered, her voice soft and raspy. Khufu squared himself toward her and watched her eyes fill with tears. Khufu, she said. Without moving his head, he glanced left and right. She had used his name, a name unknown to any of the others. Do it quickly, Commander Hu said. He took a deep breath, then another. There were 10 of them in total. Of the villagers, there were at least 50, maybe more. They were weak, but their strength together could be formidable. If he turned his gun on his commander, then perhaps the other villagers would seize the opportunity. He looked at the villagers. He saw old man Tiber, his face a mask of grief. He saw the fear in the children's eyes. He saw the collectors, their faces blank, black pools of nothingness shining in the rain. He thought of his new home in the gleaming city in the distance, built on the backs of people like this, his people. He thought of the comfortable life he had, the life he'd purchased with his silence, his willingness to join his oppressors. One more deep breath. He raises his rifle and squeezes the trigger. The shot rings out, and the rain freezes. Hu staggers back, his hand clutching his chest. He takes a few clumsy steps, and then collapses. The wind whistles through the village and sizzles in the gripping silence. Then chaos erupts. Collectors turn, weapons raised. Khufu looks to Willow. Run, he says. He then aims and shoots at the closest collector, then another, and another. All 3 of them fall, but he feels a sharp bite in his shoulder, and his arm goes limp. He dives toward a vegetable stand and takes cover. cabbages explode around him, and voices shout, mixing together like dense fog. Khufu lifts his rifle atop a nearby barrel and aims, his other arm still hanging lifelessly at his side. To his delight, at least 20 villagers, including Willow, have overtaken the remaining collectors. He stands and looks around. 4 are dead, the rest disarmed. They have done it. Willow turns, and their eyes lock. The sun finally crawls out and reaches down as if to embrace them. Khufu, she calls, a light of hope in her eyes. She begins to run toward him, her arms outstretched. He reaches for her. "Do it quickly," I said. It was Commander Hu. Khufu's eyes went wide. He shook the driving rein from his visor. "Yes, sir." "Khufu, please," Willow screamed, her face flooded with tears. He raised a hand to his lips. "Shh," he said, trying to calm her. But the promise felt like ash in his mouth. He opened his eyes and squeezed the trigger. The awful sound rings out and echoes like laughter amidst the booming thunder. Willow's body slumped to the ground. A hand clasped Khufu's shoulders. "Well done," Commander Hu said. "Now load up." A willow of weeps. Her bones were brittle, but not from age. These days, it was a workout in itself to wipe the counters clean, and had even become hard to pick up the unused dishes she'd find on the table at the end of the day. The ceramic was too heavy for her frail hands. She set a place at the table for each of her children, complete with her finest china and silverware in the proper way. But, she supposed, her children had better things to do than come eat with their poor mother. She didn't mind, seeing as she only wanted them to be happy. And so the table was continuously set and continuously taken apart, but never a drop of food to clean up, as the cycle repeated itself over and over again. Every day she made the bed in the guest room, which no one ever used, and the beds in her daughter and son's room. She never made her own, because she was afraid of encouraging bed bugs in the tightly packed sheets. The days went by in a blur, and how could they not when she was biding her time, cleaning off the same shelves, bedside tables, and book covers she did the day before? For a house with very little movement, there sure seemed to be a lot that needed to be done. So there she was, perched on a wooden stool at the granite countertop, scraping at some invisible speck of dirt. She hummed to herself, softly rocking back and forth. It was hard to tell when she had last eaten, but her shaky hands shed some light on the matter. She grasped the silver knife in her hand and then let it drop, a resounding clink following suit. "Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you," she cooed. "Oh, Lisa darling, how I adore you." She went on and on, singing them praises with a tired smile on her face. She hummed a tune in the still air. Pick me a pear from that tree outside. Hand me a willow of weeps. Kiss all my tears away, darling, while I send you to somber sleep. Only when she heard no reply did she start up again. Take me to dance, and we'll sing along the lonesome tune of the night. Lend me your ear, and I'll make a song to sing you. Goodbye, goodbye. The fire beckoned, so she willed her legs up off the stool, grounding her feet on the cool tiles of the kitchen floor. She made her way to the little carpet beside the hearth, humming all the while. The rug beneath her was cold and stiff, a mass of black and white fibers, all woven together. Once the fire was stoked, she huddled her knees to her chest and resumed that gentle rocking back and forth. She picked up a pretty little jar by her side, lazily examining the carvings engraved on the stone. Swirls and swooshes of wind alongside a small wilting chrysanthemum, delicately designed. She traced the carvings with her thin, brittle finger. Then she opened the jar. She reached 2 fingers into the opening and took a small pinch of the contents. With a delicate flick, she sent the ashes into the heat. She watched, mesmerized, as the fire grew and died, grew and died. With each pinch of ashes, she found herself smiling, humming that tune that kept on a loop in her mind. Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you, she cooed once more, sending some ashes into the fire. Oh, Lisa, darling, how I adore you. Then she took the jar, perched dangerously close to the flames, and sent the rest of the ashes down into the coal. The fire roared in gratitude and grew bigger still, and all the while her heart beat with a sad, sad rhythm as she kept that absent smile on her lips. Then, to her horror, she heard footsteps, loud, panicked footsteps, making their way down the stairs in the hallway. So close they were, she was sent into such a state of panic that she dropped the jar onto the floor, its ceramic shell breaking upon contact into hundreds of tiny shards. She let out a scream. Oh, Charlie boy, how I love you, she sobbed, huddling against herself, rocking furiously. Oh, Lisa, darling, how I adore you. She sobbed and wailed until she thought she couldn't anymore. And even then, it continued, an endless flow of tears. She let out another scream as she felt 2 sturdy hands on her shoulders. Oh, Charlie boy, is that you? She wailed, rocking harder. Mrs. Jamie, it's time for your medicine, darling. Another shriek, the words sending her into an episode. Oh, Lisa, darling. Oh, Lisa, darling. Where are you, Lisa, darling? She began slamming her hands into her knees and rocking so hard forward that she sent her whole frail body toppling onto the ground. Mrs. Jamie, it's me, Randy. I'm your nurse. I'm here now. Everything is okay now, she wailed some more. Because, of course, everything wasn't okay. Charlie boy, Lisa darling, help me! And then she surrendered to Randy's strong grasp, wailing still, as he took her upstairs to her bedroom. She was so worked up that she could barely see, her eyes welling with every thought of that fire, those ashes. She kicked and flailed as she was firmly placed into bed, tucked in tight for all the bed bugs to see. Mrs. Jamie, it's okay, Randy said softly, stroking her hair as he fed her various pills and a glass of water. I'm here now. You're safe. I will keep you safe. She looked up at him with big, innocent eyes. Just like that, she had already forgotten the panic she was in moments ago. She resumed the gentle rocking as her frail hands clutched the sheets. Charlie, she murmured. Lisa, they're safe too now. They're not in pain anymore. Hush now, dear. It's about time you went down for a nap, huh? Bread, tea, life. A steaming loaf of bread. For the last year, Marco, a UX designer by profession and a baker by hobby, has been fighting forgetfulness. Not sure how it started. Maybe there was a medical reason. He'd lay in bed thinking a tumor was cooking in the corner of his brain, slowly degenerating his memory, closer to a stroke with each day. He didn't even know if brain tumors and strokes had to do anything with one another. He just knew both were bad and didn't want to know more. Or maybe it was all due to alcohol and cigarettes in his younger years. He used to drink and smoke heavily until the bad habits caught up with him at his friend's wedding 3 years ago. He woke up with a hangover, but it was a different type of hangover. His head felt like a malfunctioned computer that worked at 50% of its capabilities. His mind would turn on and off as he was waiting for breakfast. Then, after a fourth time going to breakfast to douse his face in cold water, his brain turned on entirely. He could almost feel the full power of consciousness kicking in. The probability that it might not happen next time scared him, or maybe it was due to that tick bite he got 2 years ago. 2 weeks later, it turned out he had Lyme disease. It was discovered early, and he drank antibiotics. But you never know. Or maybe, actually most likely, it was because the sorry excuse for a human that was his wife was driving him crazy. Constantly nagging. Never was everything fine. Always something wrong. And it was him that needed fixing. Never her. Or if she needed fixing, it was because of something he had done, even when what he was doing was good. For example, back when he didn't have a sustainable income, life was bad because she was carrying the financial weight. Then, when the tables turned and he became the one bringing in the money, life was bad because she felt useless. Then, all the diseases. One day, it's breast cancer. Then it's leukemia, only to be suspicious of an unknown bone disease. Next, the mental issues: bipolarity, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. Marco had no problem with any of those. He was there to help. What ticked him off was the nerve to complain about his behavior when he had a bad week. It was understandable if she was in a rut, but God forgive if it was the other way around. Then he was a selfish and cold-blooded bastard. All of that was the reason for his panic attacks. Marco has never had them before as long as he could remember. Then he'd get sudden panic attacks while waiting for her to finish her shopping or while on a bus. It would happen out of the blue. He'd have a perfect day, then a sudden surge in the brain and panic. The result was panicking about a possible next panic attack. He couldn't remember if this was before or after his friend's wedding. It was a long time ago. Too many events to remember the exact time. Finally, the tea. The apartment was full of tea. Green tea, black tea, Earl Grey, matcha, chamomile, Desert Delight, 1001 Nights, the Gauss flights. All these general and random names. And okay, it was fine. Nothing wrong with someone enjoying tea. But she'd buy one. God knows it would be outside her budget. Drink it once, and then leave it in the cupboard. Like a lunatic collector. But instead of LP records, it was tea. Anyways, Marco stopped for a second. What was he doing again? It was always like this. He'd be doing one thing, start thinking about her the next, get angry, and then forget about closing the fridge door. He looked at the still hot loaf of bread. He took the knife and cut into it. Steam was dancing from it and mixing with the kitchen. A perfect concoction of tasteless air and oven-fresh pleasantness. Then he looked at a small bottle next to it. Was he really going to poison her? What a crazy thought. He still couldn't believe how he managed to get his hands on the poison. The poison needed to have no flavor. He didn't want to jeopardize the bread, but could he do it? Now that the moment has arrived, could he kill? No. Could he kill another person? His wife, out of all people. He wasn't that type of person. The ones you read about in the news, they are always ugly, weird, and either too thin or too fat. He wasn't that. He liked people, and people liked him. Unlike the fat and the thin, he had a reason. She brought him to this point. He'd never do it for pleasure. His action was justifiable. He cut 2 pieces of bread and put them on a plate. He opened the fridge and took some ham and cheese. Next, he cut both ham, cheese, into fine finger food pieces and decorated them next to the bread. The fridge light helped him see better. He picked up the plate, took a deep breath, and walked towards the living room. He stopped. Wait. 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 Did he put the poison in the dough before baking the bread? He remembered pondering whether to lace the bread before or after. It made sense to do it before. But what if the heat neutralized the poison? Unlikely, but it could happen. He should have used more than a few drops. What's the worst that could happen if he didn't? He chuckled. She'd die even more? Huh. Snap out of it, Marco. Did you put the poison or not? He grabbed the bottle and brought it to his eye level. He jigged the small brown bottle to see if there was less poison than before. No idea. He pulled the cork and smelled the poison. No smell. What was he expecting? Damn fridge. Always forget to close it. Marco slammed the fridge door. What to do? What to do? Maybe he should roll with it. And if it works, it works. If not, he'll try again. No. That means he'd have to hide the poison somewhere in the apartment until the opportunity arrives. He couldn't live with the stress, not with all the cleaning she does every single day. Bake another bread? But what if she arrives while he's baking the second bread, and the first bread is already on the table? How would he explain that? His gaze stopped at the tea cupboard. He grabbed the chamomile, mint, lavender, rosemary, and clove mix, turned on the stove to boil water. 250 milliliters exactly. He shoved a teaspoon into the mix and combined it with water. Then he waited for 5 minutes. The tea was ready. Just don't forget her. I remember her, the first time I laid eyes on her. She knocked at the wooden door. I knew it wasn't an adult knocking. I just know these things. The sound was light, timid, and just a bit too low on the door to belong to someone grown. I walked across my living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and unlocked the door. As I pulled it open, the hinges groaned softly, and there she was, standing on my porch, waiting for me. She came to me, and I knew it was her. I knew right away she was the one I'd been waiting for. I felt it. It's hard to put into words, but if I had to, it was like being struck by lightning in the pit of my stomach. A surge of electric energy coursing through me and ending in a sharp, tingling burst at the base of my skull. She was tiny, small even for her age, and her presence seemed to shrink further under the weight of the gray autumn sky. Her long blonde hair framed her round cheeks, dampened slightly by the drizzle that had been falling all afternoon. Her light blue eyes, startling in their clarity, reflected the dull brown of my front door, as if they were trying to absorb everything around her. She smiled then, just a flicker of a smile, timid, shy, It might have been imperceptible to someone else, but I saw it. I knew it was there. "Hi," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind rustling through the bare trees. I crouched to her level, studying her face as if I might find answers etched in the softness of her features. "Hello," I replied, the word catching in my throat. Her small hands clutched a green box close to her chest, a makeshift tray hanging from her neck with an assortment of colorful packages. "I'm from Troop 195 of the Girl Scouts," she said, her voice steadier now, though still carrying a gentle, unpracticed rhythm. "I'm selling cookies to finance our trip to Washington next year. Would you like to help?" I blinked, her words pulling me from the strange fog that had overtaken me since I first saw her. "I'd love to help," I said, forcing a smile. "What exactly are you selling?" She brightened, her confidence growing with every word. "I have caramel chocolate chip, do-si-dos, lemon-ups, and thin mints." I nodded slowly, leaning one arm on the door frame. "Those all sound delicious." And they did, each one of them. I wasn't lying. I'm not a liar. I've always tried to tell the truth, to open up to anyone who showed even the slightest interest in, well, in me. It's rare enough that someone does. "Which ones would you suggest?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The do-si-dos are the most popular," she replied, a practiced response, one she'd probably used at every house she'd visited. I tilted my head. "Are those your favorite?" Her expression softened, her small fingers playing with the corner of a box in her tray. "No, I like the Girl Scouts s'mores. But," she hesitated, her eyes meeting mine, "we're all out of those." She seemed genuinely saddened by that, and I could see it in her eyes. That's something I've always been able to do. Read people, see the emotions they hide behind words and smiles. It's a sensitivity I've had since I was a boy, and it hasn't faded with time. "How about this?" I said, my voice lowering, like I was sharing a secret. "Give me 2 boxes of do-si-dos now, and when you get more Girl Scout s'mores, I want you to come back here and bring me 10 boxes of those." Her face lit up, her smile blooming into something real and full. It wasn't timid anymore. It was happy, proud. She looked like she'd just conquered a mountain, a small victory in a world that often feels insurmountable at her age. "Really?" she asked, her voice rising with excitement. "Really?" I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the cash. I handed it to her. She reached for it, her movements unhurried. And as she did, I let 3 of my fingers graze the back of her small hand. It was a fleeting touch, imperceptible to her, or at least I thought it was. But I noticed. I noticed how her skin quivered, ever so slightly, under my fingertips, like the faintest ripple in still water. She quickly pulled the money back, her attention shifting as she counted it with practiced efficiency. Then, tucking the bills into the small pouch at her side, she handed me the 2 boxes with both hands. She held them out as though they were treasures, precious and fragile, the way a child often treats even the simplest things. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice louder now, the earlier shyness melting away. "I'm happy to help," I replied, meaning it. She turned to leave, clutching her tray of cookies like a prize. At the edge of the porch, she paused and looked back at me, her eyes wide and sparkling with gratitude. "I promise I'll come back when we get more s'mores." "I'll be waiting," I said, watching as she skipped down the driveway, her small frame disappearing into the gray drizzle. I stood there for a moment, holding the boxes of cookies in my hands, feeling a strange warmth that wasn't entirely explainable. It wasn't about the cookies or the sale. It was about the way her smile had lit up the gray, how her small victory had momentarily lifted inside me. I closed the door and set the boxes on the counter. For a long time, I just stared at them, my mind replaying the exchange. Something about it had settled deeply in me, a seed waiting to grow. But her room wasn't ready. I needed to get it ready for her, to make it perfect, comfortable, a place where she could grow strong and healthy and happy. She deserved that, so I worked at it tirelessly, transforming the cold, gray basement into a beautiful sanctuary. The walls, once lifeless and bare, were painted a soft, light pink, the kind of color that whispered warmth and innocence. A bed with a quilted blanket sat in the corner, flanked by a small table with a lamp shaped like a butterfly. I built a shelf, filling it with hundreds of children's books, toys, and dolls. Every detail mattered. A camera sat discreetly in the top corner of the room, its lens fixed on the space where she would sleep and play. It wasn't about control. It was about safety. I added a lock to the heavy wooden door, one that could only be opened from the outside. It wasn't to trap her, no. It was to keep the world out, to ensure nothing could hurt her. The best part, though, was the shopping. I spent hours picking out clothes for her, envisioning her wearing them, imagining how she'd look. I chose soft fabrics in bright, cheerful colors, clothes she could wear now, and some she'd grow into over time. Each piece felt like a step closer to her, to making her mine. And then I waited. I waited for her to come back. Days turned into weeks, and still I waited. The 2 binders of cookies sat on the counter, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to open them. Instead, I would trace my fingers along their edges, touching the cardboard like I had touched her hand. Sometimes I'd lift one to my face inhaling the faint mix of packaging and something else, something peculiar and fleeting. The smell of her, the anticipation was unbearable. A constant hum under my skin. Each creak of the floorboards, each knock at the door, sent my heart racing, hoping it would be her. But she didn't come back, not yet. I knew she would, though. She had to. I'd made everything perfect. And then, one day, her knock came. It wasn't just any knock. It was her knock. I knew it instantly, even before my body moved to rise from the couch. I felt it in my chest, in my veins. A spark of anticipation coursing through me. The moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd been preparing for, was here. The chance to see her again, to look into her bright eyes, to show her what I had built for her, because of her. Because she was the one. It was her. I crossed the room in a few quick strides, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. There she stood, with that smile. It wasn't as shy as before, more certain now. Like she knew she was welcome, like she belonged here. In her hands, she held a neat stack of cookie boxes, her reason for coming back. Or so she thought. I smiled at her, a warmth creeping into my voice that I couldn't mask. "It's good to see you again," I said. She beamed, her cheeks flushed from the cool air. "I have your cookies, and since it's such a big order, I added a pack of lemon ups for free." "Well, now that's very kind of you," I replied, my tone light and friendly. I slipped my hands into my pockets, pretending to search for the cash. My fingers met empty fabric, as I knew they would. I hadn't carried any money in weeks. The truth was, I didn't want to hand her the money here on the porch. Not this time. I needed her to come inside. I looked up at her, feigning a small chuckle. "Looks like I forgot my wallet. It's inside, in the kitchen," I said, gesturing behind me. It wasn't a lie. I don't lie. I never lie. My wallet was in the kitchen, sitting right on the counter, next to the untouched cookie boxes from her first visit. The ones I had been saving for this moment. Her smile didn't falter. She nodded, clutching the boxes tighter. "Oh, that's okay," she said, ever the accommodating Girl Scout. "Why don't you come in?" I asked, stepping aside and motioning to the warmth of the house behind me. "It's cold out there, and you've been walking all afternoon, haven't you?" She hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking to the open door, the inviting glow of the living room beyond. Then she smiled again, this time with a hint of excitement, like this was just another part of her adventure. "Okay," she said, stepping inside. I closed the door behind her, the sound of the latch clicking into place, sending a thrill through me. It wasn't loud, but to me, it echoed. I turned to her, my smile steady, my heart pounding. "Make yourself at home," I said, my voice calm and even. "Let me grab that money for you." She nodded, her eyes wandering around the room, her curiosity as innocent as ever. She was perfect. Perfect. And she was finally here. Oh, do I remember her? The way her muffled cries felt against my left hand as I pressed it over her mouth, lifting her from the ground with my right arm. She bit down hard and kicked wildly, her small shoes landing against my legs, but I barely felt it. I told myself it was normal. She didn't understand. Not yet. She couldn't comprehend what I had done for her, what I had built, the sacrifices I had made. Not yet. Her body thrashed against mine as I carried her, her weight so light it felt like she might vanish. But she wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. I took her down the stairs, each step an echo in the stillness of the house, and through the door. Not a room, not just any room. Her room. This was the place I had prepared for her. The place where she would grow, where she would finally be safe, where I could ensure nothing and no one could hurt her. I would see to that. Only me. I would witness every moment, every milestone. She would know, in time, how much I cared, how much I loved her. I threw her onto the bed, her small frame bouncing once before she scrambled back, pressing herself against the pink walls I had painted just for her. She screamed, her voice raw and high, tears streaming down her red face. "Please, let me go. Please," she begged, her words garbled through sobs, her tiny hands clawing at the quilted blanket I had chosen with such care. But I knew it would pass. It always passed. The crying, the yelling, the fear, it would all melt away after a few weeks. It always did. She just needed time to see. Time to realize that this wasn't what she thought it was. This was better. "It's okay," I said, my voice steady, calm, trying to cut through her cries. "You'll understand soon. I promise." Her tears only fell faster, and her words dissolved into incoherent sobbing. I watched her for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, but not from regret or hesitation. It was from the sheer anticipation of what was to come. This was just the beginning, and like I said, I don't lie. I never lie. But they didn't understand that. They didn't understand anything. They took her away from me just 3 days after she got here. 3 days. That's all the time we had. They stormed in like animals, breaking through the front and back doors, screaming, their boots pounding on the floors. I had walked in peace for years. And the guns. Oh, the guns. Pointed at me. At me. Me, who had kept her safe. Me, who had given her a sanctuary, a place where she could be loved, cared for, where she could grow without fear. They didn't see the love in my eyes, the care in my hands, the way I had worked so hard to make her life perfect. They only saw their own distorted version of the story, their judgment cutting through my truth. They didn't understand. Oh, I remember her. I've remembered her every single day for the past 24 years, 364 days, and 6 hours. I know because I've counted. I've counted every second, every breath, every heartbeat that has passed since the moment they tore her from me. But now, just a few more days, just a little more time, and we will be reunited. Finally, I've waited for this. I've prepared for it because, like I said, I don't lie. I never lie. Toxic confections. Beep, beep. Catherine put on her oven mitts and pulled out the hot tray of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. She turned the oven off before the timer could beep again. Working quickly, she lifted the cookies off the sheet and onto a cooling rack. She cleaned as she went, making sure not to leave any crumbs on the counter or any dirty dishes out. Brendan would be coming home shortly, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She had gone out earlier to buy a large brown rug for the living room and situated it underneath the coffee table. She had seen rugs used in the movies. She was careful to use cash, as she didn't want the purchase on her credit card. Catherine hoped he wouldn't notice the new rug right away, but if he did, she'd just tell him she wanted to spruce the place up a bit, which she rarely ever got to do. Their home was always so clean and welcoming, though. Nothing was ever out of place. Brendan's friends loved coming over here for football Sundays. She would shower them with snacks, beer, and witty commentary as she portrayed herself as the perfect housewife. She checked the clock. 3:44 p.m. He would be getting home in less than half an hour. Her breathing quickened, and her heart starting beating hard against her chest. She'd been meticulously planning this for weeks, and now it was only 20 mins away from happening. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. This needs to work. She had gone to the library and read through too many books to get this wrong. Everything, down to the measurements she needed. And the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Hello? Catherine slowly picked up the phone on the edge of the counter. She wasn't allowed to have a cell phone, so the only other option was a landline, which sucked because it had no caller ID, so she often had to deal with telemarketers. Hey, Kat, how are you? The familiar voice on the other end asked. Her sister was one of the only people in her life that still talked to her. Catherine had slowly pushed everyone else away over the last few years, becoming quite isolated. Hi, Becca. I'm good. How are you? How's Brian? The kids? She asked, trying to sound normal and hoping the answers would be quick. so that she could get back to preparing for tonight. We're all great. I hope we can get together soon. It feels like I haven't seen you in ages. We need to go for dinner or drinks soon, Becca exclaimed. She always sounds so bubbly and happy. I wish I could be like that, Catherine thought to herself. Maybe one day soon. Yes, I'd love to. Sorry, I've been so busy lately with work. I just haven't gotten around to seeing anyone. We will hang out soon, though. I promise. This was a lie. Catherine hadn't worked in 3 years, but she'd been lying for so long about it that changing her story now felt impossible. The truth was, she couldn't let her sister see the bruises and cuts that marked her body, the ones that showed up too often and were sometimes too hard to hide. A week ago, one of Catherine's old classmates from college had recognized her when she was at dinner with Brendan. A tall, attractive man she had known only because they had done a couple of group projects together in English class. She did her best to end the conversation quickly, feigning disinterest, but the damage was already done. The drive home that night was silent. But as soon as they got through the front door, Brendan screamed at her, accused her of cheating with this man, whose name she couldn't even remember. You are such a whore. You open your legs for every man out there, don't you? Am I not good enough for you? Is that it? You think you can do better than me? No, I barely even know him. In between sobs, Catherine had tried to reassure him that nothing was going on. I haven't spoken to him since college, and nothing ever happened between us. Bullshit! His fist hit her in the stomach first. When she keeled over in pain, he pushed her backwards into the wall. She fell onto the floor, and he continued kicking her in the legs, ribs, arms, anywhere but her face. He knew that wasn't so easily covered up like the rest. She put her arms up to protect herself, begging him to stop, and he eventually backed off, only to grab a glass from the cupboard and throw it at the wall just above her head before leaving the room. Glass rained down, scraping her head and arms. A trickle of blood rolled down from her forehead into the corner of her eye, blurring her vision. This wasn't the worst he'd ever done to her, but it still cut deep. The physical pain stung, but the emotional agony was far worse. How could the person she loved treat her like this? She lay there on the floor for an hour before forcing herself upright and cleaning up the broken glass. Brendan was already asleep, so she showered, bandaged herself up, changed into pajamas, and got into bed beside him, all the while planning her escape. Brendan was used to her forgiving him every time he had one of these episodes. He was very good at manipulating the situation to make her feel like it was all her fault. He would buy her flowers, tell her he didn't mean to hurt her, but that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't entertained him. been so careless, left such a huge mess for him, etc. She was always the one who ended up apologizing. Little did he know, she had wanted to leave him for months, but was terrified that he may actually kill her if she tried. She was also always a little hopeful that he would change, because she did still love him, as much as she tried not to. After the last 3 times, though, she no longer cared if he changed or not. She needed to get herself out of this permanently. "Kat, you there?" Becca's voice startled her back to the present. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Just distracted. Still have so much to do before Brendan gets home. I don't want him to see this mess. Plus, I have to make dinner and do the laundry still. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yeah, of course." Becca paused. "You know, he could be helping you with some of that too. You shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself." She had never liked Brendan, had tried to convince Catherine not to marry him because she got a bad vibe from him. Too bad Catherine hadn't listened. "I know. I'll talk to him. Love you. Bye. Love you too." Catherine hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Bending down, she reached under the sink, behind the garbage can, and pulled out the bottle of cyanide. Again, she poured a tablespoon of it into a teacup, then started boiling some water. She had decided on this method because she had read that it was clean, simple, and often used by housewives with horrible husbands. There would be no messy cleanup, and it was so easy to slip something into his food or drinks without being detected. One thing he did appreciate about her was her cooking skills. She knew her way around a kitchen, and he always ate everything she made. She had mixed in a good amount of cyanide into the cookies, hoping he would eat a lot of them. But just in case, she would also be putting some in his tea, which would be waiting for him on the coffee table when he got home, next to a plate of cookies. If he offered her some, she had planned on her excuse being that she had already eaten one, and that was enough. Brendan liked her skinny, and often commented on how much she ate, so he would understand. Just as she finished mixing the cream and sugar into his tea, she heard the sound of Brendan's tires crunching gravel on the driveway. She looked out the window to see him climbing out of his car. Catherine took one more quick look at everything she had prepared. "I think this is it. This either works or it doesn't. He dies or he kills me. Either way, I'll be out of this hell." He came through the door, tossing his briefcase down on the ground. "Honey, I'm home. Where's my kiss?" Brendan called out. Catherine hurried over, reaching up to give him a quick peck before helping him with his coat. She felt a slight twinge of sorrow as she realized this would likely be their last kiss. But she pushed that thought out of her mind by reminding herself how he has treated her these last few years. He'd isolated her, insulted her, beat her, made her feel like she was worthless, and then made her think everything was her own fault. Fuck him. I made your favorite browned butter chocolate chip cookies. Come have a seat, she offered, putting on a big, fake smile as she hung his coat on the coat rack. Great. I'm starving. I had a rough day at work today, he said, taking a seat on the couch. She noticed he didn't say thank you, as though this kind of greeting was just expected of her and warranted no appreciation. She watched as he took a sip of the Earl Grey cyanide tea and then a bite of one of the cookies. These are delicious. They taste a little different than usual, Brendan said. Yeah, I tried something a little different today. Catherine smiled at him. It's good. Hey, is this a new rug? He finally noticed, taking in the brown, patterned, synthetic fiber rug below his feet. Catherine's heart jumped, but she remained calm. She had prepared for this. Yeah, I saw it today and thought it would look perfect in our living room. And later, you'll look perfect, all rolled up in it, she thought to herself, holding back a smirk. Well, I think a gray rug would have been better. We will have to pick out a nicer one this weekend. Nice effort, though. He finished one cookie and started on another, taking a sip of tea in between. So condescending. I can't wait till he shuts up for good. Okay, baby, she said, turning around and heading into the kitchen so he couldn't see her expression change to annoyance. Catherine pulled the water jug out of the fridge and poured herself a glass. Behind her, she heard Brendan cough and say, I'm not feeling too well. Did you do something to these? She turned around in time to watch him vomit on the new carpet and clutch his head. His head must be killing him by now. Headaches and vomiting are some of the first symptoms of cyanide poisoning. He laid his head back on the couch, dazed. I'll have to make sure he doesn't leave any vomit on the couch, too. I really don't feel good. Call an ambulance, he begged, quietly. His body began to shake with convulsions. Seizures were another symptom. Catherine stayed silent, watching as he slowly stopped seizing, and then breathing all together. She quietly took pride in freeing herself from such a monster. Someone who pretended to love her only to hurt her more deeply than she'd ever been hurt was truly monstrous in her eyes. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she mourned the last 5 years of her life. No one should ever have to endure the kind of abuse she had. And now, he could never hurt her or anyone else ever again. Now, all that remained was to get rid of his body. A small smile tugged at her lip as she set to work. Pebble, rain pattered against glass. Burnt beans overtook the scent of fresh bread. Voices overlapped as stories were shared and gossip was spilled. The game played on the TV. We were winning. The buzz in the air was almost intoxicating. Even the rain couldn't dull it. Gray stared at the brown liquid. Steam rose, collecting into beads of sweat as his face hovered over the cream-colored mug. Blonde curls curtained flushed skin and bleeding lips as his teeth pulled at the delicate skin. He was in his own air. The buzz flowed around him. His ears were stuffed with the nectar of the past. It seeped out, dripped down his arm, burned through his skin, revealing scars that were hidden with years of neglect. Nails cracked as he dug into the wooden table. His mind swirled. The nectar was thick. It was creeping through the crevices of his head, consuming thoughts he pushed down and forcing him to face it. Metal filled his mouth as Gray bit down harder on his lips. Pain filled his face, and the sob got stuck in his throat. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the mug and took a sip of the bitter liquid. It stung at his bruised lips, but the taste was welcome. A deep breath led to long sigh, releasing tension as he slumped over the table. Pebble? He clenched his eyes closed as his mind flooded. The bricks of the dam slammed and slammed against the limit of his conscious as the memories flooded over him. Gray scrambled across the sticky ground. He gripped at the blood-soaked hoodie, pulling the small body into his arms. His fingers left trails as he rubbed at the bruised skin, hoping his touch would wake him up. Pebble, come on. What he thought was a yell was nothing more than a cracked whisper. Shaking hands gripped at curls that were just like his, just a bit brighter in color. He just kept repeating himself, holding the one good thing in his world, rocking him back and forth like he had to do to help him fall asleep just a couple years ago. A few feet away, smoke rose from the fifth cigarette lit today. It found its home between cracked lips. Lips that never once said anything that portrayed an ounce of care. Those lips belonged to a woman of dirty beauty. Beautiful blonde curls that have been passed along for generations framed a pretty pale face that was stressed by a chosen sickness. She stared at the scene, the bodies that were her offspring, at least by the doctor's words. But just 'cause the doctor said it doesn't mean she cares for it. The law forces her hand, forces her to obey her parental expectations, but it can't make her look at them with anything but an icy indifference. That indifference made her not care when they cried, when they needed to be held, when they needed someone to praise them, when they won, and support them when they fell. That is why, when her youngest was beaten with vase after vase until the glass shards impaled him because he whined too much, she didn't move a muscle. One less expense. Tears were dripping into his coffee. little splatters staining his clenched hands. He took one and bit on it, holding inside his screams as what happened just a few hours ago replayed. Stepping inside the decade-old home, the wood creaking with every step, the excitement he felt with Deku swinging in his pocket, imagining the look on Pebble's face as he held his favorite character in his hands. Then the way his soul dropped into the pit of his stomach. How his vision blurred until the only thing he could see was his little brother laying on the smoke-infested rug. His blood making it an even darker shade of black. The glass fractures, creating a mosaic of different colors that flickered in the light of the dusty swing lamp. Knots formed at the bottom of Gray's stomach. It burned. It hurt. The more he pushed it away, the more it forced itself forward. Their mother sitting there, watching, dusting the ashes off her pants. Their father's snores, traveling from down the hall. He bit into his skin until it split. Luckily, his shirt was black. No one could see the blood that was making it stick to his chest. Just the dirt that's layered on top of it. He couldn't leave his brother laying there. Someone had to bury him. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. Gray turned his head, blood trailing down his chin. "Are you okay, honey?" It was a middle-aged lady. Her hair was thrown into a tight ponytail that made her sharp features pop out even more. He licked his sore lips. Looking down, he had bit into the white meat of his hand. Blood trickled down his skin and dripped onto the table. Puffy eyes, blood-tinted skin and lips, dirt-stained clothes. Gray knew he looked a mess, swallowing his answer. His voice probably wasn't going to work anyway. He grabbed his coffee mug and walked right past her. Curious eyes probed at him as he walked towards the glass doors. Someone behind him was asking him to wait. But he didn't listen, or he couldn't hear. Either way, he walked straight into storm, the rain soaking his body in just a few minutes. Puddles splashed, cars honked, wet grass coated abused shoes. Gray let his feet lead the way. They brought him to the park. It was empty, of course. He climbed onto the playground, crawling his way into the little tunnel, the one place that was still dry. Somehow, he was still holding on to the mug. He took a sip. It tasted like brown water. In the tube, surrounded by the rain cascading down, he let himself cascade. Sobs spilled out until his whole body shook. His hands not able to find the right place to stay. He kept trying to stick them in his pockets, but then he remembered Deku wasn't there. It was tight in Pebble's hand. He gripped his hair, his scalp protesting. His mother's nonchalant figure, his father's peaceful rest, Pebble's warm body lying there, still. It lit something in him. Everything he was holding inside, all that he kept hidden. to keep a smile on his little brother's face. All he dealt with to protect him. Everything he never gained that he gave. His sobs trailed off into a coughing spill. His mind broke. The pain spilled over, the cuts, the bruises, the memories. The mug cracked in his tightening grip, his shaking hands from the cold, or his anger he didn't know. With a crack, the mug spilled into his lap, and a deafening scream spilled from his lips, the force bruising his already sore throat. It filled the tube. The storm swallowed it, taking his pain into its grasp as his vision blurred with red.